What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. In this video, I'm going to be doing some load development for my compact 300 Win Mag rifle. And the purpose of this load development is to duplicate or exceed my favorite factory load for this rifle. So my favorite factory load is from Choice Ammunition. It's their 175 grain LRX. And I get around 2,850 feet per second of muzzle velocity out of this 20-inch barrel Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan. And I get around half MOA accuracy. So the goal of this load development is to get at least 2,850 feet per second and at least half MOA groups. Now, I've shot the Choice Ammunition 175 grain LRX load out to 1,000 yards, and even at 1,000 yards it still maintains half MOA accuracy. I've gotten 5-inch groups at 1,000 yards, so I'd say that's really good for factory ammo, especially out of a 20-inch barrel rifle. So that's my goal. I want to get at least 2,850 feet per second. Preferably, I want to get maybe another 50 to 100 feet per second more velocity. And I also want to improve on the accuracy. I want to get less than half MOA. Preferably, I want to get hole-to-hole groups at 100 yards. Okay, so that's less than a quarter MOA in accuracy. Okay, and that's what this rifle generally does with jacketed bullets that I use, like AccuBonds or Spear hot cores. I usually get either hole-in-hole or hole-to-hole groups at 100 yards. So I want to make these LRX bullets as accurate as some of the most accurate jacketed bullets like the AccuBond. It's kind of a tall task, you know, getting a solid copper bullet to group the same as a jacketed bullet. It's always more difficult to do. Solid copper bullets, by their nature, are less accurate than jacketed bullets. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but at the very least, I want to get at least 2,850 feet per second and at least half MOA accuracy. That is very acceptable to me for what I plan to use this rifle for, which is big game hunting across North America, from white-tailed deer all the way up to brown bear, and also for SHTF. So this is going to be like a general purpose hunting and even an SHTF load. Okay, and that's why I chose the LRX for this load, because the LRX is a solid copper bullet. It doesn't expand as much as an AccuBond or a Swift Sirocco, but it penetrates better. And sometimes if you're hunting something like a brown bear, you want more penetration rather than expansion. And I just think that the LRX bullet is one of the best general purpose hunting bullets for a 30 caliber Magnum all the way out to 1,000 yards and even beyond 1,000 yards. Now, I've done a penetration test out to 800 yards with this Choice Ammunition load, and even at 800 yards with a muzzle velocity of 2,850 feet per second, which is kind of on the slow side, even at 800 yards, those LRX bullets still got a lot of expansion. They got over 40 caliber of expansion. So, you know, they expanded to over 40 caliber. So, you know, the LRX will expand even at low velocities. The impact velocity was around 1,500 to 1,600 feet per second, and it still expanded. So if I can get a little bit more velocity out of my hand loads, if I can get another 50 to 100 feet per second, that'll basically extend the range of my rifle with the LRX to 1,000 yards, and that's what I want. I want a do-all hunting and SHTF load that I can use from 25 yards all the way out to 1,000, and know that I'm going to get good terminal performance, okay? Good expansion, good penetration, and good impact energy, all right? So a little bit about this rifle. It has a 20-inch barrel, and it's the Ruger M77 Hawkeye. Why did I choose this rifle? It has a 20-inch barrel. It's kind of stupid to have a 20-inch barrel on a 300 Win Mag. Well, sometimes velocity is not the most important thing. A 20-inch barrel is so easy to carry all day long when you're in the bush, okay? Especially in forested terrain. If you're in open country, then yeah, carrying a 26-inch or even a 30-inch barrel, it's not a big deal. But when you're going through forested terrain and a lot of underbrush, you know, having a 26-inch barrel plus a suppressor on top of that, that's going to really make your life difficult. So that's why I went with the 20-inch barrel, and also it comes with iron sights. I don't know why a lot of companies today don't make iron sights on their rifles. You know, getting iron sights on a hunting rifle should not have to be difficult, okay? It shouldn't have to be a custom job. You shouldn't have to go to a gunsmith to have iron sights on a factory rifle. They should come with some kind of iron sights, and the Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan comes with really nice express style sights. Now, why is that important? Well, if we're talking about a do-all hunting or SHTF rifle, you need to have some kind of iron sights for backup. Okay, if I'm in Alaska and my scope gets messed up, I drop my rifle on a rock and I smash the glass, and I'm miles away from civilization surrounded by brown bears, I don't want to only have a barrel that I'm going to try to point at a charging brown bear with like a shotgun. Okay, I want some iron sights. And so this rifle has really nice iron sights. Same thing with SHTF, okay? You can't rely on your scope 100%, and especially if you're out there deep in the wilderness, you have to have some kind of iron sights. So that's a huge reason why I chose this rifle. And I get extremely good accuracy with this rifle. With factory ammo of all kinds, I can get quarter MOA groups. I've already put a couple hundred rounds through this barrel at probably 1,000, and I have minimal throat erosion because it's a hammer forged barrel. And I just love this rifle. I can't say enough good things about it. I have upgraded it. I changed out the factory stock with a Hogue stock that has an aluminum bed block that goes all the way from the fore end into the buttstock area, so it's nice and stiff. I changed the trigger out to a Timney trigger, and I have it set to around 2 pounds, and it's just really crisp and really smooth. And again, with this 20-inch barrel, I can put a suppressor on this thing and it's still very manageable to carry, okay? If I had a 26-inch barrel and then I put my 7.5-inch long suppressor on top of that, it's just a monster to carry, guys, okay? So yeah, you get another, 100 or 200 feet per second with 6 more inches of barrel length, but with a suppressor, it's just a monster to carry. And, you don't really need a suppressor necessarily, but, I like to shoot suppressed. It makes you a better shooter. Eliminates flinch, especially when you're shooting a 300 Win Mag. The suppressor makes a huge difference in terms of your ability to get tight groups, okay? So I want to just show you guys the components I'm going to be using to make this load. So for our powder, I decided to go with Ramshot Hunter, and the reason why is Ramshot Hunter has a little bit faster of a burn rate. It's in the 4350 family of burn rates, so it has a similar burn rate to H4350 or Accurate 4350, and I think that's a good burn rate for this short barrel 300 Win Mag. A slow burning powder like H1000 or Ramshot Magnum, which I have both of those. A slow burning powder like that is not going to get good velocity out of this short barrel. most of that powder is going to be wasted in the suppressor, okay? And I'm going to have a huge fireball. So I want to use a faster powder so the powder burns up completely inside of this 20-inch barrel, and also so I don't have to compress the load, okay? This Ramshot Hunter is a ball powder, and it's also temperature stable, which is important for what I'm trying to do. I don't want to have a round that I have to constantly adjust for my muzzle velocity depending on the season. You know, in the winter, 100 or 200 feet per second less than in the summer. I don't want to have to deal with that, okay? Because at long distances, beyond 500 yards, even 25 feet per second can make a huge difference. So I want a temperature stable powder. I want a little bit faster of a burn rate. And Ramshot Hunter is perfect for that. Also, it's readily available. And H1000 and Ramshot Magnum, as of the filming of this video, March 2023, is all out of stock. And I have a few tubs of Ramshot Magnum and H1000, but I don't want to waste them because they're hard to replace. So I figure give Hunter a try first, see how it works with Hunter, and if it doesn't work with Hunter, then I'll go to H1000 or Ramshot Magnum. Probably H1000 first, because H1000 is a little bit faster than Magnum. So that's the plan, and I'm going to be using some CCI primers. Now, the Barnes load data recommends Federal 215 primers. And from everything I've read, the CCI primers are actually a little bit less potent in terms of the velocity and pressure than the Federal 215s. So what that means is that most people say that the CCI Magnum primers are about a grain less in terms of your load data. So if, let's say, your max load is, 100 grains, if you're using a CCI primer, you're going to get up to 100 grains and you're not going to be at the max load yet because it's a little bit weaker than a Federal 215. However, the CCI is actually better at igniting in cold temperatures, and that's one reason why I stockpiled a lot of CCI primers years ago, because CCI primers, especially their Magnum primers, are known to be reliable even in extremely cold conditions. And so for my purposes, hunting around the world, and for SHTF, I don't want to have to worry about poor ignition in cold temperatures. Here in northern Pennsylvania, in a normal winter, the temperature gets down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit almost every night. So I definitely don't want to have to worry about that. So CCI 250 primers, which are all sold out at the moment. And let me just show you guys the bullet here. So this is the 175 grain LRX. It's a boat tail bullet. And what I also like about the LRX bullets is they have the same ballistics coefficient as the 180 grain AccuBond. So this 175 grain LRX has a ballistics coefficient of 0.508, and the 180 grain AccuBond has a ballistics coefficient of 0.507. So they have the same BC and they're only 5 grains apart. So what that means is I can develop two loads. I can have a 180 grain AccuBond and a 175 grain LRX, and if I have them both going at the same speed, they're going to have the same drop, okay, the same ballistics, more or less, okay? So that's awesome because I could basically use the same dope information regardless of whether I'm using the LRX load or the AccuBond load, okay? So depending on what I'm hunting, depending on what I'm doing, I can switch between the AccuBond and the LRX, and they're going to have the same drop. I don't have to carry separate ballistics data for each load, okay? So that's a big advantage, all right? So this is my plan, guys, and let's see what happens. Let me show you guys some of the load data. Let me give you also a close-up look at this rifle. So this is actually still my absolute most favorite rifle that I own, even though I have rifles that are much more expensive and custom rifles and all kinds of different stuff, but this is still my most favorite rifle, my go-to rifle. It's just a workhorse. It's very practical. And I have this Silencer Co. Hybrid 46 attached to it. So here are the iron sights. Okay, look at how beefy those iron sights are. They're made for Africa and Alaska. They're very beefy iron sights. And the front sight is actually a banded front sight, and it also has a banded front swivel stud, and that's for heavy recoiling loads. Okay, so you don't mess up your hand from having a stud over here. Okay, and I just have this Athlon 2.5 to 15 power scope. Okay, excellent scope. I've taken this rifle out to 1,000 yards many times, and accuracy is incredible. So let me show you guys some of the load data, and I'll also give you a close-up look at this Ramshot Hunter powder. So here's our Ramshot Hunter powder. It's a ball powder, and what's nice about ball powders is they meter really nicely. Look at how it just flows. So it's really easy to trickle and get really fine grain measurements because it just flows so nice. Look at that. And actually, if you pour this powder too fast, it'll actually bounce out of your pan. It bounces like a ball, basically, you know, like a basketball. If you pour this powder too hard, it'll just bounce all over your reloading bench. But it has a coating on it, so it's temperature stable. Ramshot says that from minus 40 to plus 120 degrees, there's only a 3 to 5% variation in velocity, so that's pretty impressive. So let me show you guys the load data and show you guys my plan for this load development. All right, guys, so let me show you this load data from Barnes. So here we have the 300 Win Mag load data, and it's valid for a 24-inch barrel, so 4 inches longer than mine. And they have a Remington case. I'm going to be using Norma, and a Remington 9.5M primer, and a case trim length of 2.610. That's standard for 300 Win Mag, and the max case length is 2.620. So for the 175 grain LRX, you can see they have Ramshot Hunter. They have a max charge of 72.3 grains for a max velocity of just over 3,000 feet per second. I think it's going to go higher than that. I think it's going to get closer to 3,100. Because I used Quick Load to get some numbers, and Quick Load was showing 3,074 feet per second with the same charge, 72.3, and the same primer and same case. And so they have a starting charge or a minimum charge of 65 grains. So I think I'm going to start at 66. I don't think there's going to be any pressure down at 66 grains. I just want to save some powder and save some primers and bullets. So I'm going to start at 66 grains, and I'm going to work up in half grain increments all the way up to 70 grains. And then from 70 to 71, I'm going to go in 0.3 grain increments. And then when I go from 71 to 72, I'm going to go in 0.2 grain increments. And then once I get to 72, I'm going to go in 0.1 grain increments, okay? But as you can see, with some of their top powders for these loads for the 175 grain LRX, even with Ramshot Magnum, you're only going to get another 60 feet per second. and you have to use a lot more powder, another 10 grains of powder. And Ramshot Magnum is impossible to find right now. It's probably going to be out of stock for who knows how long. So I don't want to waste my Ramshot Magnum to get only an extra 60 feet per second. So I'm going to go with the Hunter. And plus, I think the Ramshot Magnum, like I said, it's too slow for that 20-inch barrel. A lot of that powder is just going to be wasted. And I'm going to get a huge fireball, and I'm going to beat up my suppressor. So I'm going to go with the Hunter. It's a faster powder. It's going to burn up in that 20-inch barrel, and I think I'm going to get much better velocity with the 20-inch barrel. So let me just show you guys how I'm going to do this test. So like I said, I'm going to start at 66 grains, and what I'm going to do is I want to go up to pressure, look for pressure signs, and then find my max, and then work my way back down and settle on an accurate load that's going to give me an acceptable velocity. So I'm going to work my way all the way up to 72.3 and see if there's any pressure signs there, and then I'm going to work my way down. And so what I'm going to do is, for probably the first half of this test, I'm not even going to shoot at a target. There's no point. I'm just going to be shooting the first couple of grains over my chronograph just to work up and see if there's any pressure and see what kind of velocities I get. And then once I get closer to max, I'm going to shoot over my chronograph, and I'm going to shoot at a target at 100 yards. And I'm going to shoot 2 shots for each charge weight to see what kind of grouping I get. You don't necessarily need to shoot 3 shots to get a group. For a Magnum rifle, really 2 shots is all you need to get a good understanding of the accuracy of a particular load, okay? So from 66.0 to 70.9, these are going to be just shot straight over the chronograph. So I'm going to be doing a ladder test with the chronograph. And then for the second half of the test, basically the last grain before I get to max, I'm going to shoot at a 100-yard target and over the chronograph. And this way I'm going to be able to see not just if I have a node from the velocity standpoint, but also an accuracy node, okay? So this is going to be like a combination ladder test of a velocity ladder test and a grouping ladder test, okay? So that's how I'm going to approach it. So from 66 to 70, I'm just going to go half grain increments. Then I'm going to go from 70.3 up to 71.2 in 0.3 grain increments. And then from 71.2 to 71.9, I'm going to go in 0.2 grain increments. So I'm going to go 71.2, 71.4, 71.6, 71.8. And then after 71.8, I'm going to go in 0.1 increments up to max. So the last half a grain before I get to max, I'm going to use 0.1 grain increments, okay? So that's the safest way to do it if you're trying to work up to a max charge. And as far as the seating depth goes, they're recommending an overall length of 3.360 inches. So first I'm going to use their recommended overall length, and then once I find a velocity node and an accuracy node, then I'm going to settle on one of those nodes, and then I'm going to play around with the seating depth. So this is basically the beginning stages of my load development. Okay, I'm looking for a node from a velocity standpoint, and then I'm looking for a node from an accuracy standpoint. And I also want to see how the velocity changes as I add more and more powder. And let me just show you guys the burn rate chart. This is the 2023 burn rate chart. So here we have Ramshot Hunter down over here. And you can see it's just right below H4350. It's just slightly slower than H4350, and it's right below Reloader 19. So it's in this family of burn rates, okay, the 4350 family of burn rates. It's just a little bit faster than H4831. So I think it's going to work great. And let me just show you how it compares to H1000 and Ramshot Magnum. Look at how much slower H1000 and Ramshot Magnum are. Just much, much slower. Ramshot Hunter's all the way up here, and H1000 and Ramshot Magnum are all the way down here. All right, they're close to Rotumbo, and they're one of the slowest powders. So I don't think that's going to work with my 20-inch barrel super well. And those powders are very hard to find right now. So I have to work with what I have, and I want to conserve these slower powders for my longer barrel 300 Win Mag. I have a 24-inch barrel 300 Win Mag that I want to do loads for, so I want to conserve these powders for that. Okay, so that's the plan, guys. Let me show you now my reloading equipment. I'm not going to be able to show you the actual reloading process because of YouTube community guidelines. So I'll show you my equipment, but I can't actually show you how I'm doing it. All right. So I'm going to be using some once fired Norma brass from some factory ammo. And I'm using a Lee single stage press, and I'm going to be using some Lee reloading dies. And this is the scale I'm going to use. It's just a simple Lyman pocket scale. It's very accurate. You just have to zero it frequently and make sure that it's maintaining zero. After you weigh a couple of charges, it has a tendency of losing its zero, so you have to reset the zero and double check it frequently. I'm going to use just a powder trickler from Frankfurt Arsenal, nothing fancy. Very simple setup, very cost effective. And I'm going to full length resize to about 3 thousandths below the SAMI specs. So the SAMI specs base to datum is 2.270 for 300 Win Mag. I'm going to resize it to 2.267, which might seem a little bit excessive, but I like to have a little bit more play in the chamber. I don't want to be really tight, especially for a hunting rifle, and for an SHTF rifle, I don't want to have brass that's going to be to the max of the headspace. It's going to cause extraction issues possibly in warmer weather, or if there's any kind of dirt or anything in the chamber. So I'm going to go just a little bit below the SAMI spec. So I'm going to bump back the shoulder probably 3 to 5 thousandths. So I like to do that, like I said, for reliability. So that's pretty much it. And another tool that I'm going to use is this VLD chamfer tool. This makes seating bullets, especially the TTSX or LRX or TSX bullets, super easy. Any kind of long boat tail bullet, you want to get a VLD chamfer tool. And the difference between a VLD chamfer tool and a standard chamfer tool is, you see this angle here? It's a 22-degree angle, so it chamfers the case mouth to a much more relaxed angle, and so it makes seating the bullet super easy, and it puts a lot less pressure on the bullet tip and also on the bearing surface when you seat the bullet if you use a VLD chamfer. Okay, if you don't use a VLD chamfer and you seat these long LRX bullets, it scrapes the bearing surface of the bullets. You scrape a lot of the copper off, and you also get that little stamp on the tip from the seating plug in your seating die. So I highly recommend a VLD chamfer tool. I think it's a must-have for reloading any .30 caliber Magnum, or really any cartridge that you plan to shoot at long distances. And if you plan to use long high BC bullets or solid copper bullets like the LRX, it just makes the seating process go a lot better. And I'm using some Lee case lube, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to load up these cases, and then I'm going to head to the range. So stay tuned for part 2. And we'll see how long it takes for me to find a good, accurate load. Am I going to be able to reach the same velocity as that choice ammunition? Am I going to be able to get half MOA? I sure hope so. And for all of my 300 Win Mag content, check out my 300 Win Mag playlist. And for all of my reloading content, check out my reloading playlist. I'll leave links to them in the top right corner. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.